Morning all. Let's have a look at the interesting game between Michael Adams and Judit Polgar yesterday in the London Chess Classic, 3rd of December. So Michael Adams playing white kicked off with e4, and we saw a fighting move from Judit, the Sicilian defence. After knight f3 we see e6, but now Michael Adams doesn't go for the more standard d4, the most standard, but instead plays g3. Okay, why is he playing g3? Well, we've recently seen actually on this channel the Judit Polgar Immortal, and that was a Sicilian defence, and we know she can be pretty ferocious with the Sicilian and given dynamic tactical opportunities. So maybe Michael Adams is trying to steer the game into more positional, quieter waters with this move. Perfectly valid move. Fischer earlier in his career used to really enjoy playing the King's Engine attack setup. So this is kind of King's Engine attack system, especially if white is going to be playing d3. Okay, so we see Judit just trying to control the dark squares a bit. Now knight f6, kind of provoking a move like e5. But for the moment, actually, the pawn is just protected with queen e2. Okay, and we see d5 from black, which is a little bit interesting already. Has Judit already committed a slight inaccuracy in the position? Because normally you wouldn't want to play d5 without being able to recapture like this to extend the scope of this bishop. Now here, d5, okay, it can give black semi-open file pressure and eyeing d4, but on the other hand, white's eyeing that e file, and maybe this is uncomfortable for this light square bishop being at home. But also, if white eventually plays d4 and c4, maybe there's potential for white to try and get space in the centre. In fact, e takes d5 is played here. I think e5 is less effective in this structure. Black will have a kind of French defence, comfortable French defence, with the fianchetto maybe not being that effective here. So e takes d5 is played. Queen d5 allows a tempo game which might be useful for white, knight c3, or other moves potentially, you know, like later moving the knight. So knight takes d5 seems to look fair enough. White castles, bishop e7, and now a move which, when I first looked at it, seems super calm, really incredibly calm move, but it is a calm position already. It's not a ferocious Sicilian defence type position by any stretch. It's a much quieter type position. The move is just rook d1, just slowly threatening d4, and then maybe c4, and then maybe d5, which will establish a strong pawn on d5, and potentially this bishop's not going to be that good either. It might open up this bishop, but getting a centre pawn like this could be really dangerous for black. Black castles, and we see the move d4. Okay, does black really want to allow the tempo gaining c4 followed by d5? It seems very dangerous to allow that. So Judit takes on d4, and that's evil. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, rook takes d4. There's pressure, there is a threat of c4 here. Bishop f6, the rook moves, and now queen c7 getting out of the way, offering a pawn sack to weaken maybe light squares. Also, okay, if c4, maybe knight b6 here or knight b4 would be okay for black. Does white really want to get a pawn here and give Judit tons of counterplay? No, of course not. But we'll check that out in the second pass of this game, just snatching the pawn. It fundamentally doesn't look like a good idea at all to take the pawn here in this particular position. c4 is instead played, knight b4, and now we see knight c3. Okay, white seems to be enjoying a very pleasant position indeed. In fact, I have a small confession to make here, that there is one Petrosian brilliancy in our brilliancies list, which is from the King's Engine attack, which just seemed to me so cozy for white that it's almost tempting to play the King's Engine attack system oneself. It's a good system sometimes, but here it wasn't even the King's Engine attack system. It was white playing d4 in one go. It was, not so bad in any respects. This bishop seems absolutely brilliant. This bishop seems brilliant as well for bishop f4. If black ever dares to play e5, then there goes d5 as well. There's a lot of threats here. In fact, Judit's got a really passive position. It's a miserable position, especially this bishop on c8 at the moment. It's absolutely a miserable position the more you look at it, this from black's point of view. What an opening success for white. Avoiding sharp position territory, not giving black much counterplay at all, it would seem. So a6 doesn't really look as though it's going to improve black's position hugely. Bishop f4, and Judit now plays e5, relinquishing control of d5. Okay, liberating the bishop, but d5 is now in white's hands in one go. Bishop e3. Okay, it looks nasty immediately. For example, a3 and knight d5 look huge. Bishop e6, and now knight d5. Forget about a3, knight d5. Just trying to encourage black to take it to get this big passed d pawn, which is actually what happened. What else can black do? If queen d8, it would seem bishop b6. It's a miserable position for black. So Judit takes with the knight, doesn't want to give up the light square bishop, so this is another tempo gain. The pawn is accelerating ahead with d6 now, a very fast pawn already with d6, with tempo again. It's miserable. If queen c2, maybe just taking, and rook c1, and bishop b7, it's just not very nice. b7 is a big problem for black here, a concrete problem. In fact, after queen d7, this next move, bishop b6, just seems to have the idea of bishop c7 and bishop takes b7. Very simple. Even if that pawn's blocked, there's problems here. Rook ac8, bishop c7, threatening bishop takes b7, it would seem. Huge problems for Judit without much counterplay. A miserable type position indeed. It's not going to be, from the point of view of brilliancies, it's not going to be a brilliant game. From black's point of view, it seems already the writing's on the wall here, because there isn't too much counterplay in black's position. It's a bit dead. Bishop g4. Michael Adams doesn't mind an exchange of light square bishops here. He plays bishop f3. Doesn't mind it at all. The queen will be nicely placed on f3. It's still eyeing b7. This bishop's like miserable behind that pawn as well. Okay, h5 is played. Rook ac1. Rook fe8. And now bishop takes g4. H takes g4, queen e4, threat, queen takes b7. What can black do? She moves the queen, d7 looks nasty. So bishop g5, rook c5 on e5 now. Bishop d8. So tactically, is there some sort of pin trying to be used here on this d file? Is c7 vulnerable? Well, c7 is protected a bit more with queen takes b7, netting a pawn at the same time, being able to just take on c7 multiple times now if needed. Rook e6, rook d to d5. What was the threat here for black? What was the concrete threat? Well, rook d5 seems to also now create the threat of rook takes e5 for white, but we'll check the second pass if black had been threatening anything in particular there. It's just a miserable position still. Rook f6, not minding losing another pawn. That's how miserable it is here. Okay, the rooks are just supporting each other against any bishop c7 ready, so they're kind of useful like this. So 2 pawns up. It looks, to be honest, all over already. Queen f5, queen e2. It just shows in chess it's not really always about playing trendy openings and playing theory and memorizing tons of theory. It's about getting positions which give you advantages, and ideally where the opponent hasn't got any counterplay. That's one of the things. The professionals, they don't want risky games. They want to just win games without too much risk of losing, and to do that you don't want to give the opponent too much counterplay. And here Mike Williams, one has to say, has been very successful with his opening choice. Now, okay, e5 is under huge fire, so it doesn't matter about losing a2 here. Check. Rook d1, takes on a2, takes on e5, 2 pawns up still. And you might think, well, hold on a sec, what about this c7? It's not a big deal because of the 8th rank and checks here, and this g4 is also weak now. It's a disaster. Bishop takes c7 was played, check, getting rid of a pair of rooks. And now d takes c7, threatening to queen. Judit plays queen a7, the faint hope of getting a perpetual check. That's extinguished with this next move, queen e4 check, controlling the diagonal, which means White can now play c8 safely, not even being concerned about queen f2. In the light of this, Judit resigned. It's cruel. There was no counterplay, there was no fun to Black's position, it seemed, at any stage. But we're going to verify that in the second pass, I think, of this game. Let's verify that. So in this position, yeah, White's just queening. It doesn't matter about queen f2. It's just chess. It's just chess sometimes. Some games can be won just ideally without the opponent having too much counterplay. Let's go back and see. So the ambition might be for counterplay, for a fun, exciting tactical game, but it's White's choice to go into that sort of territory, to play d4 here. g3, it's can lead to very cosy positions. Let's be honest about it. This move g3, it was, the King's Indian attack system was employed by Fischer earlier in his career, but here it's not a King's Indian attack system, really. It's not. d3 doesn't have to be played. White can go for d4 in one go, the way it was played. With this next move, queen e2, White is vacating d1 for that rook to come later, as we saw. This d5, I mean, possibly, d5 is a small error. The engine is not usually an authority to do with openings or opening theory. Here, what is preferred engine move? I mean, maybe bishop e7 is possible as well as e5. e5 looks too committal for the d5 weakness. d6 looks like a fairly standard sort of position. If followed up by bishop e7, it looks solid enough, not loosening too many dart squares. Even if White plays d4 later, this could be a brittle hedgehog type structure. But d5, really? Okay, so if we look at bishop e7, I mean, maybe that's possible, because e5, isn't that knight d5? Isn't that possible? Or does it look a bit too weird? I mean, this is a bit provocative. It looks like some kind of c3 Sicilian variation, a little bit. Can't be that bad for Black, surely. But d5, really? Okay, we see e takes d5, knight takes d5. Technically, it looks as though White hasn't got much at all in terms of an advantage at the moment. Off the bishop e7, we see the move rook d1, which is more aggressive than d3. This engine move looks awfully passive, d3 here, and it was avoided by Adams. What is wrong with rook d1? Why just give another choice? Rook d1's not even on the radar here. Even two choices, given two choices. Seems fairly logical. Did black miss a trick here? Okay. It seems maybe the engine doesn't think this is great, rook d1, because of the simple looking move e5 in this position, which does create a bind on d4. Is there a problem with black playing e5 then, to try and stop d4? It does liberate the bishop. If black's going to weaken d5, maybe this is the position to do it in. But hold on a sec, you might think, as I've just observed, doesn't e5 just lose a pawn? That's interesting. Very interesting. Let's check this out. Knight takes e5. Knight d4. And that hits c2 and e2. So if queen e4, that is on the knight here, but knight f6, queen d3, this looks dangerous because of bishop f5 is coming up. So queen c7 hitting the knight, c3, bishop f5. Black seems to be doing okay in this position, more than okay. So that means, was actually e5 possible? Let's go back here. So e5 in this position, just to try and stop white from playing d4. This looks like an improvement. Knight takes e5, knight d4. What else for white? Queen f1. Let's go with queen f1. Okay, you might think, hang on, what's happening here? Knight takes c2. Check is annoying here because you can't play bishop d7, just take and take on d5, king f8. Queen c4 is strong here for f7 and d5. Let's go with this. Bishop takes d5. White's doing fantastic. That's brilliant exchange sack here. It's going to be playing for knight f7 soon. So actually, there was a way of playing it though. On queen f1, forget knight c2, the move f6. Let's go with this. What's going on here? If the knight just goes back, we've got knight c2 surely. Knight takes c2. If c3, knight c2 might be palatable here. Okay, it's interesting anyway. If black wanted to stop white from playing d4, this might have been the moment for the tactical e5, which looked crazy. But there's a kind of weakness of the last move being exploited, being made use of here, that the knight is coming off d4 and that's being pounced into. So okay, with black playing just castles, suffering a bit of a disadvantage now, we see this tiny advantage emerging. Small advantage symbol has occurred for white after d4. So this is the mystery why the engine like rook d1. If d4 can be played like this, looks great, absolutely great now for white. C takes d4, knight takes d4. Black has problems, and probably this taking is a mistake here. It looks as though it's increasing white's positional advantage, just taking here. So unfortunately, a slippery slope has been gone on to here. Bishop f6, rook d1, concrete threat of c4 now, just winning material. So Queen c7, but c4 anyway is just strong positioning. White's got a great position. Knight b4 looks a bit strange. Knight b6 maybe. Try and keep the advantage down to a minimum. From an engine point of view, it's still unpleasant. That can be protected with knight d2 or knight a3 if this happened. The tactical knight e4 is possible in this position. Okay, just to try and challenge this bishop. So if the bishop has to go back now because of the back row, knight f6 and queen d8. Let's say, for example, knight takes c4 here, just taking. I'll check. Oh, this is too dangerous for the king's safety. Okay, so let's go back. So maybe Judit wasn't too impressed with knight b6 for some reason. She played knight b4, and White's advantage is getting out of control here from seemingly passive looking opening. White is looking hugely better here. It looks ultra cozy all of a sudden from nothing. That's one of the strange paradoxes of chess. Sometimes you can play a quiet opening and get a lot more than if you try to play a sharp opening. You get an ultra cozy position, no problems with the bishops or the rooks connecting, saying hello to each other here. So a6, bishop f4. Okay, what's wrong with bishop f4? It encourages another weakness. Is there something which is wrong with knight c3? Not really. No, a6. So bishop e3 was also liked here. It's an enjoyable position, but what would be the point of bishop e3? Is there actually any concrete threat here? Not really. I'm just trying to see. Knight a4 might be a concrete threat for b6. For bishop b6 in particular, because this is tied down. So that's unpleasant as well as what was played. Okay, just to bear that in mind. So bishop f4 induces another weakness, e5 though. So the d5 square, this looks very unpleasant in this position. And again, now there is potentially this knight a4 threat, surely, even in this position. a4 with just knight d5 is the main threat now, just kicking the knight and going to d5 instead. So we get a huge pass pawn now in the centre. Out of all this, that's what's crystallised now. Is White slipping up here or something though? Is rook ac1 even stronger? Rook ac1 maybe makes the threat of knight d5 even stronger because the queen's going to be attacked. Maybe a slight inaccuracy there. I don't know, rook ac1. But it's an engine move because isn't the c4 pawn on? So let's check this out briefly. If bishop c4 here, this is ridiculous. Queen h5, and what's happening here? Is this really, really strong for White? Let's just say queen c8, queen e4. Has the engine gone mad here with this pawn sacrifice? Okay, it looks unpleasant. For example, bishop b5. Okay, b4 will drop, so it looks unpleasant. Things are loose in Black's position, but okay, knight d5 looks great as well. I mean, in the game here, knight d5 just created the pass pawn. This move rook ac1 just seems mysterious. So why would White be interested in rook ac1? And also, just out of interest, check out queen c4. What's happening here? b3. Here's a point. Bishop c5. That's pretty nasty. Okay, So some points are being revealed now that Rook AC1 might have actually been very interesting here in this position. So Knight D5 anyway. White still got a significant advantage creating that passed pawn. D6 just pushing it. Simple moves now, just to put pressure on B7. And the advantage has just gone up and up here. B7's under fire. Doesn't matter about exchanging the bishops here. Let's check this out. H5 was played in the game. If black exchanged off bishops and played, let's go with B5, because otherwise if the queen moves D7, I expect is becoming dangerous in theory. But at the moment the bishop's eyeing D8. A4 here, just allowing B2 to drop. There's Queen B7 here. Now D7's a huge threat. Okay, so Bishop F3. Okay, let's just go into this just once more with B5. But if, again, Queen B7 looks strong potentially. But okay, Rook AC1, and then Queen B7 is going to be an unwelcome visitor again in this position. So it's unpleasant whatever way black plays this. Okay, so H5, Rook AC1. White takes on G4 now. Queen E4. It's still unpleasant for B7. So it looks as though it was made to seem without too much issue this game at all. Queen B7 just in time supporting C7. No tactic available to black. Rook DD5, a very powerful move. The engine really likes this move, Rook DD5. What was actually black threatening? Nothing much actually in particular. Black's not actually threatening much in this position, but this secures the position, puts more pressure on E5. Now actually, if the grabbing, well, if Queen A6 has been played, then you can see that that doesn't look like a good idea. Even here though, even here, Rook takes C7 seems to be in White's favour. Even this position seems okay for White, but anyway, not needed. So Rook F6, it's just gone. It just seems the position's gone now for black. 2 pawns down. Chess made to look quite easy here in this game. So this final check, and Judit resigns. Okay, maybe one should consider playing cozy openings like this at home. Usually I would say not to play things at home, but maybe this is an interesting way, if you're not interested in a theoretical Sicilian defence battle, to occasionally try free G3. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.